everyone, and a very warm welcome to you all today. For those of you who don't know me, I am Jane Bloomfield. I'm your host for today. I'm the Global Chief Marketing Officer at Landor & Fitch, and I am absolutely delighted to be hosting what is in fact this part 13 of the Marketing Society's Global Conversation series. Now, it gets said quite often, but I genuinely believe it's true. There has never been a better time to be in marketing. It's an incredibly exciting industry, but we all know that the potential to make a difference is absolutely huge. But in order to do that, we need to keep learning, we need to keep talking, we need to keep sharing. And hopefully all of you joining us today are curious to constantly be learning more. So ahead of this year's United Nations Climate Change Conference in my home nation of Scotland, we've gathered some fantastic global marketers to join me here today and to share their thoughts and expertise on sustainability. So just to be really clear, this session is not about having every single answer and knowing all the answers to all of the questions, or even showcasing the perfect sustainability model, because quite frankly, very few brands are in a position to do that. Really what it's about is ensuring that the conversation about sustainability stays top of mind. It's creating a forum for you all to learn from each other, to share some best practice, some insights, some tips to help and really support the Marketing Society community wherever you might be on this journey. But before we get started, we want to make sure everybody is joining in. As always, we want to make this as interactive as possible. So please feel free to use the chat function to kind of, share your enthusiasm, perhaps for some of the points being made, to agree, to provoke throughout. But for specific questions, which I would love for you to submit for our panel today, could you try and use the Q&A function? The thing about Zoom is we have these two functions, and sometimes they get used interchangeably, so please use the chat just to kind of comment and keep the conversation going. But if you'd like to put a question to the panel, which we're going to save some time for at the end, then use that Q&A function and try and make the question as pithy and short as possible, as I'll be trying to juggle asking them and also reading them at the same time. If it's for a specific contributor, also do just let me know as well. So we're going to test that chat function. It's always useful to have a little bit of a trial run. If you could, please just say hi in the chat, tell us where you're dialing in from, and share your thoughts on what brands you think might be getting it right at the moment, or what marketers perhaps are inspiring you within this field. So please do just pop some thoughts in the chat and we can just check that is working for us already this afternoon. Okay, so I'm hoping things are going to start popping up in there. While you do that and say hi to me, I am going to introduce our contributors today, so you can find out who's joining us. So I'm going to start with Matthias Bloom, who hopefully is going to appear, is going to pop, there we go. So Matthias, welcome. Matthias leads country marketing teams across ASEAN and South Pacific for the Coca-Cola company. So a fantastic brand who has a lot to say in this area. Matthias himself is passionate about making change, and his personal experiences have shown him about the importance of sustainability. Also joining us is Marina McIver, who actually is joining us from Scotland. So as I said, the host nation of COP this year. And Marina heads up the campaign teams at Scottish Enterprise. So that's Scotland's National Economic Development Agency. She's currently in secondment on the strategy team, so is hopefully going to share a really different perspective. I'm excited to hear Marina's thoughts on some of the questions we might have today, as she works on the 3-year plan for the Scottish Enterprise. Over her career, Marina has gone to great lengths to promote Scotland's trade and investment opportunities. Do you know, I would wholeheartedly endorse that myself. So from looking after celebrities at the Ryder Cup and also appearing on Chinese TV. So there you go. Joining us as well is Vikram Krishna. Now, Vikram, I know, is in Dubai today. We were comparing weather already earlier today. I think he probably wins. Vikram is a banker by day and an environmentalist by choice. So Vikram is the Executive Vice President of Marketing and Customer Experience at Emirates NBD, but he's also the co-founder of something called Sacred Groves. Now, Vikram is hopefully going to share some more detail about that with us today, but it's a social enterprise that aims to protect forests all over the world. So something really interesting for us to hear more about as well. And last, but by no means least, we're joined by Peter Burdell, who is the business lead at Revolt. Now, Peter brings a background of working on some of the biggest global advertising accounts at some of the best agencies, but in fact left that to set up Revolt with the intent of helping brands profitably solve problems for people and planet, while not profiting from creating them, which I think is a really important aspect of this conversation. Do you know, how is doing good for business, and how do we tackle some of the challenges that perhaps we hear about investment in supporting the right things to be doing? So a brilliant panel to answer your questions. I can see lots of you are popping things in the chat. Thank you so much. So that clearly is working. Please do remember, stick your questions in the Q&A as we go through, but I'm going to jump right in because I've got lots of questions that I want to ask the panel and get their thoughts on as a start. Peter, I'm going to come to you first. And now the magic thing here is to remember to take yourself off mute when we ask a question, but I can see you've done that already. Peter, can you start by telling us why you're so passionate yourself about sustainability?
Yeah, well, good question. I think, well, it's one of the reasons I set Revolt up. I think for me, sustainability is about innovation and optimism. And I think recently, or over the past years, I think, again, with a lot of sort of movements or a lot of cultural led things, the word gets taken and misused. I think we spend a lot of time talking about the symptoms of its absence. And people get confused between what like sustainability really means and what's currently happening. And don't get me wrong, I'm not downplaying, you know, the climate change or anything like that. But sustainability is a forward-facing thing, and I get really excited about it because it's based in sort of human need and a consumer need. And as a marketer, as an advertiser, the consumer needs, you've got to deliver what the consumer wants without harming their future. And I think it's as simple as that. So for me, you know, lots of parallels recently, particularly, have been drawn with digital. And I think it's that same thing. I think sustainability now, as we go forward, has to be approached with the same sort of vigor and bringing it into that center of your business and pushing it forward. Because I think if you think about what your consumer is wanting, and there's a little bit of an element sometimes with brands a little bit slow to react, you know, is it the faster horse? Consumers don't necessarily know quite what they want yet, but what they do want is a better planet and a safer future. So it's interesting to have, as a brand, you're in a perfect position to go, actually, where's the innovation? How can I help them achieve this without them knowing? But, you know, how can I create that brand, create that experience, create something that delivers what they want today, but doesn't harm their future? And that's the responsibility of the brand. And if you get that right, those are the brands that are going to succeed. I think this week there's been a really interesting two people far cleverer than I, not even in their league, obviously. So Larry Fink and Bill Gates. So Larry Fink yesterday, after what Bill Gates said, so the next $1,000 billion companies will be in sustainable tech. So, and Bill Gates said the next Amazon, the next Microsoft, the next Salesforce are all going to be based with the sustainability at the core of its business. So I think I'm really passionate about it because it's innovation and optimism, just in a different word. I think people, you know, it's all about action, COP, and it has to be forward facing. But I think we've also got to get out the rhetoric of brands, of misery and grief. Everybody knows if we're not in a great place. Everyone knows we've got to change, but simply repeating the same horror stories isn't going to get us there. Fear rarely unites people. Optimism and innovation does. So I think, you know, my hope actually for COP this year is there's a lot more talk around the possibility of the future. Well, you've got to act today, don't get me wrong, but without this hope, then it's just going to get worse because people are just going to shut off from it and go, I just don't want to know. So I think for me, the thing why I'm passionate is it's going to push everything forward, make everything better, and in quite an exciting way. So I think that really drives my passion for it. And I think, you know, and you've got to negate the negativity. I just don't think it just doesn't work anymore.
And I think we can absolutely hear the passion coming through and everything you're saying. There's a couple of things that I'm going to come back to later in the conversation that you've just mentioned there. One is this idea of sustainability has to be at the heart of it, of absolutely everything. And I think, you know, I heard on the radio this morning that Elon Musk is now literally by far the richest man in the world. You know, I think partly off the back of the news that Hertz have commissioned something like 100,000 electric vehicles for their car hiring, obviously, business. So I think it's very interesting to see actually that's Tesla as a business is now clearly one of, or if not the most valuable business in the world. So we'll come back to that idea of sustainability at the heart. But actually what you've just talked on, I'd like to bring Marina and get Marina's thoughts here as well. You talked about that importance of why it matters more than ever, and how do we make it matter. Now, Marina, I've said, do you know, I love a bit of a plug for Scotland. The United Nations Change Conference obviously happens in November, so only a couple of weeks away. Why do you think this year matters more than ever? You know, are we genuinely at a tipping point? I believe we've been saying this for some years now. Do you really think the time is now?
So I completely agree with everything Peter said, and I was really excited. He's, you know, we're all on the same page here, and yet this, you know, why does this year matter more than ever? It's a decisive decade. Never mind this year. So, you know, COP coming to Glasgow. Obviously, it was supposed to happen last year. It's now here. I'm going to be in Glasgow. I'm really excited and proud that Scotland is going to be at the centre of this conversation. You know, not since Paris 6 years ago is there a more decisive COP in terms of what we need to get to and the agreements that we need to get. So there's huge optimism, and I think, you know, we all really need to push on for that. And I think there's, you know, there seems to be there is that kind of tipping point. There is that real sense that things are going to happen. And, you know, for Scotland, for me, you know, just talking with what Peter was talking about, you know, that optimism, we have amazing companies in Scotland, and we can see so many entrepreneurs popping up all over Scotland, kind of coming up with some amazing ideas around how we're going to be delivering this. You know, we've got companies who have got IGS who develops farms in a box that create, you know, that deliver foods with 95% less water. We've got you know, electric charging, the largest vehicle electric charging hubs. We've got hydrogen fire engines. We've got so many amazing ideas in Scotland. So really excited to showcase Scotland and what we can do and deliver, and work with the world as well. We're really keen to obviously get investment into Scotland and talk about Scotland in that way. And I think, you know, when you're talking about people like Larry Fink, things are changing. You know, Mark Carney, Larry Fink all talk about how the money is following sustainable businesses. That is how it's going to work, and that will be where the big change happens, because when the money follows things, that's when things really happen. And I think also consumers are really waking up to the fact that they want to know, they want to be part of a solution, and not just being on this kind of this use bus any longer. They really want to kind of really focus on how we solve these problems, because we can see it happening all over the world. We can see the changes in the climate, and we can see these things. So I think just having that sense of purpose in your business and really driving it forward from that perspective is going to be a huge, you know, we talk about climate emergency, but actually it's a huge climate opportunity. There's going to be amazing businesses created here in Scotland and all over the world. And, you know, we're really excited to work with them in Scotland. So yeah, that's why I'm really excited about COP.
And something you touched on, and actually Peter touched on as well, Marina, was this idea about sharing responsibility,
yeah,
and working collaboratively. And this is something I'd really like to talk to Matthias about as well, and bring you in here as well. But before we do that, I want us to play a short video. Actually, I think this is probably a really good time. So in June this year, Coca-Cola became the first global implementation partner for the Oceans Cleanup River project. So before we ask you a little bit more about that, Matthias, we just want to share this short clip about that partnership so everybody can get an idea. Oh, Are we hearing volume? No.
No, there's no sound.
No, I think, Lauren, can you try again for us? There you go, technology, you've got to love it. We'll just try again and make sure you can all hear it. Nope, still not. It works in practice. This is always going to be the same. I don't know if you're on mute, Lauren, is that possibly right?
Hi, everyone. So as you know, at the Ocean Cleanup, our mission is to rid the world's oceans of plastic. And as part of that, we need to tackle these 1,000 heaviest emitting rivers. Now, this problem is too big to tackle alone, it would just take too long. And that's why we work with partners to help us scale. So we already work with companies like Maersk and Konecranes for the logistics and the manufacturing of our interceptors. And we're now joined by Coca-Cola as an implementation partner for our river projects. So to start, in the next 18 months, we will work together to deploy interceptors in 15 rivers around the world. And they won't just be helping with funding, but they also actually roll up their sleeves to help make these projects happen. So we will be able to leverage their global network and people on the ground for things like government relations, setting up local operators, and helping to find the right recycling infrastructure. And these are things that are currently the bottlenecks to our speed. And that's why I think that this has the potential to truly accelerate the spread of interceptors around the world. However, this doesn't take away the fact that we find a lot of plastic bottles in our cleanup systems. And of course, many of those are from Coca-Cola brands. So when Coke approached us 2 years ago with the offer to help, I found this one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to take. You know, should we work together with a company that produces a lot of single-use plastics? Ultimately, though, after a lot of thought, I realized that this is actually precisely why we should work together. Rather than excluding a company like Coke, I believe they should have the opportunity to also help with cleaning it up. So I put my reservations aside because I think that with the help of Coke, we can be more impactful, which at the end of the day is really the only thing that counts. And that's why I believe this is the right thing for the oceans. And as a final note, for those of you who have been sending messages to Coke over the years, asking them to support us, thank you for helping to make this happen.
There you go, it works, right? If you ask and challenge, then you can see those collaborations coming together. Matthias, can you tell us a little bit more about the partnership? It's a big thing, right? You know, as we saw in the video, perhaps slightly unexpected in some parts and others saying, well, that's a bit challenging. Tell us a bit more about how it came to be and how it works.
Yeah, no, look, I think as we look at Coke, our objective is to collect 1 bottle for every bottle that we sell by 2030. So we know we are part of the problem, so we need to be part of the solution. And obviously, if you're the #1 brand in the world, there's no doubt you're going to be found everywhere, wherever you do a survey, because while there's a lot more single-use plastic that's unbranded, obviously you don't know where it's coming from. So by default, we're always going to be the #1 brand that's being called out. So it's a fundamental element of what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, and we're tackling it in 3 ways. We're working on designing packaging that's actually recyclable and reducing our footprint by less plastic and encouraging consumers to recycle. We're working massively on collecting more, but partnerships is a massive part as well. So that's the 3rd pillar. And obviously the ocean cleanup is one great example of many different ones that we do. I read an article or an interview last week with the CSO of FedEx who said sustainability is a team sport. And I think that's for me is super fitting, because at the end of the day, it's not the government alone, it's not the consumer alone, it's not industries, it's all of us together. If I design all my packaging to be recyclable and the consumer just throws it away, we haven't gained anything. And while Boyan's company is called the Ocean Cleanup, and that was where he started, what he's now actually come to realize is the starting point is reduce the amount of trash that ends up being in the ocean. That's the way to start off. So we're working with him and his company on deploying a number of interceptors around the world. And obviously within ASEAN and South Pacific, we have 4 of the 5 countries that contribute the most to ocean pollution. So it's something that you can imagine is on any bigger meeting, on any agenda that we have, to really make sure, and forms a big part of our business plan. How do we contribute to massively reduce and help? So partnerships overall, I think, is fundamental, whether it's to develop new technologies. We're working on using plastic that's coming out of collected plastic that has been in the ocean already. We're working on recycled PET. So if you look at Europe, almost 100%, same for Australia, of the smaller packs that we sell are made from recycled plastic instead of virgin PET. We're using PET plastic because it has a higher recycling value. We're working with a lot of grassroots organizations in ASEAN to actually help collecting, because the plastic bottles have a value. And while in Europe, many countries, we do have a deposit system, we don't have that in ASEAN. So we have to actually contribute and help people to collect. We just are about to open a big recycling facility in the Philippines, which once it comes live in Q1 next year, it can work through 2 billion plastic bottles. Now, this is not us doing it alone. This is partnering with Pepsi and a lot of other industry partners. So we know it's not us, it's all of us. We were the first company many years ago that was able to produce plastic out of 30% plant-based materials. Would have been easy to say, oh, let's make that our competitive advantage. Let's talk to the consumer about it. The first thing we did when we had the technology available, we licensed it, or we made it available to other partners. So Heinz, for example, used it in its ketchup bottles, because at the end of the day, I don't think anyone should benefit from the ability to invest and make steps ahead, but really sharing it. So it's a collective effort. It's a team sport. We have a shared accountability, and especially when you look at Southeast Asia, I think it's much better we as industry leads it, versus waiting for governments that unfortunately in many cases are not able to set it up, different from Europe. So it's a big point on our agenda, and it's something that we're doing together. And what I like about the clip that you just shared for Boyne is he talks about the trap you might be falling in as an NGO, because on the one hand, he's working to clean up the troubles that we're creating, and at the same time, he knows he can't do it without us. And so for us, partnering with him, as he was sharing in the clip, was a longer journey until he got to the conclusion, yes, I want to do it. And still, the day we announced it, he had clear the need to share this clip on Twitter. And what I found very, very positive was that the majority of comments on Twitter or retweets were very positive and applauding him for doing it, while calling us out to keep working on getting into a better place.
I think what's great in that example is the transparency, right? As you say, he was very transparent as to his own thinking and the organisation, so the Ocean Cleanup's thinking and going into the partnership, but explaining why it was a really, really good thing for everybody involved. And I do think that idea of transparency is really important. I think the idea of shared responsibility, you talked about that, Matthias, and the impact, I think everyone's talked about it, is some of those unexpected partnerships and the sharings of learnings. But this idea of responsibility, Vikram, I'd love to bring you in now as well, and you know, talk about, as important as it is for companies to make changes. Matthias talked about the fact that we have to reduce the amount of trash or rubbish, do you know, that we as consumers and as humans feel is acceptable to throw into the ocean or to throw on the streets. You know, we have that personal responsibility to take action. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing and the work with Sacred Groves around sustainability?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be delighted to do that, because you know, as they say, Matthias mentioned, right? Sustainability is a team sport. And I think the point is that everybody has to play their part. And we as marketers are lucky because we represent large corporations and we're able to influence a lot internally within our organization as well as externally. But I think what's also equally important for us is to walk the talk and make sure that we do exactly what we say. So in our context, I was particularly perturbed by the fact that 40% of our plant species today are facing extinction, and every 6 seconds we lose a soccer field equivalent of primary forest. So that's depressing. But what excited me about this whole context is that, can I do something about it? So I started on this journey along with my partner, my wife, and another friend of mine, and we started buying forests. So our own personal forests, and we said we're going to buy the forests and we're just going to let it be for the country to enjoy and leave it for posterity. And as we started on this journey, a whole lot of people came to us and said, hey, can we join you in this process? So that's really where Sacred Groves, our company, came into play. And this is something that I do all weekends and all nights. So I have a day job, for the record, and then all our free time goes into this. So essentially what we do is that we digitize a forest. So we acquire a forest and we digitize that using geospatial imaging. And then using analytics, we divide that up into clusters, which can be supported by environmentally sensitive individuals for a fee, and companies too. What they get in return is they're able to access our platform, and they can see through Google Earth exactly where the forest is, what's the biodiversity that's being supported, how much pollution is being removed, how much carbon is being sequestered. And that addressed a very fundamental issue that I have leading sustainability and corporate responsibility for my bank, is traceability, right? So when you're spending money on a cause, then you should know where it goes and what difference does it make. So what we're able to do with Sacred Groves and all of these clusters that are on the blockchain, you're able to see exactly where your cluster is. You're able to see exactly how much impact it is making over the years. And what I find super cool is that you can also gift them to others. So Jane, I can gift you a Sacred Grove cluster over Christmas, or on a birthday or an anniversary. So we're just trying to, what Peter mentioned is, sustainability is also a lot about optimism. It's also a lot about, what can I do to make a difference? So that's the path that we are on, which is that how do we make sure that we create an enterprise where people at scale can get involved, have some fun with it. Of course, it's a very difficult topic. It's a tough topic. But I also feel very strongly that if you harp on the negatives of anything for too long, the brain sort of phases out. So it's very important to inspire people. It's very important to show and demonstrate that, look, there's a better tomorrow, and you can start immediately. So on our platform, you can start supporting a forest in 3 minutes. So that's what we're trying to do. We have a few forests in Wales, Marina. We've got 2 in Wales. We've got some coming up in Canada. There are discussions happening in Nepal, in Africa, in India. So I'm hopeful that by the end of next year, I have at least 8 forests on my platform, and a couple of 1,000 acres that we're able to protect. So that's our story. I'm a banker by the day, but this is what I do.
I know, I love the fact you have these 2 different jobs, but very much there's a common ground between them, right? There is that passion and belief of how do you take what you believe in and do it in both sides, both your personal and your private life. Now, I will come on and talk a little bit more about that in a second, but actually, Peter, I'd love to get your thoughts kind of building on what Vikram has just talked about, and this idea of how do you get sustainability to go beyond just pledges and compliance, right? How do we turn something that has the potential to be a little bit too much stick into something that people genuinely want to build into their lives, because that's really how we're going to change things, isn't it? When it becomes a sort of learned behaviour, and we can see that sort of value and action gap decreasing. How do we make that shift from compliance to more about brand value?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question and not an easy one, and I've thought of some examples to maybe help people on the call to understand, okay, what can I do as a marketeer? But I think, I should start by saying I really don't like pledges. I mean, me, myself, as a business owner, must have signed 2 or 3 climate things in the past 3 years, and nothing's happened off the back of them. So the problem is with pledges and compliances, even net zero 30, which will come under some heat at COP26, because one, it's not consumer centric. And I think the problem with the pledges is it's already an apology. So a lot of the issue is in the compliance part of the business. You're already siloing sustainability as something that isn't important. It's something you have to do. And that's, I think, of the biggest shift that needs to be made, is going, actually, it's not a company-centric thing. It's a consumer-centric thing. So if you think about your consumer and your end goal, it's something they value. So how do you then bring that into your brand values and create something that they really want to be part of? So I think, you wouldn't have compliance for your innovation department. You wouldn't sign a pledge to say, I'll make better products. And you just, or I'll have, I mean, it's, interesting that sustainability, not having a sustainability plan or not having it part of your brand values is like not having a website. I mean, that is the stage it's going to go along. So it's incredibly important. The difficulty is, how do you connect those two things? Now, similar to what Vikram was saying, again, I think it's, nobody buys a Tesla because it's sustainable or it's an electric car. You buy a Tesla because it's a really cool car if you can afford one. It's a really cool car that happens to be electric. And I think that's how you have to approach these things as brand value. Being purely sustainable will only attract a certain amount of consumers, a very small number of consumers. However, the innovation and the sustainability is the reason why they will come back. So I think having it as part of your brand value would be, you have to have the exciting, but you have to have the fireworks, you have to have a great product. I think leaning purely on the sustainable, which people have done for years, the product doesn't actually take off. I think you have to make the innovation and the sustainable part of it really, really exciting, and people feel good about buying your product. That's why they come back. And, we work with ABI and did a lot of interesting research around getting Budweiser brewed with 100% renewable electricity. Now, how that came about was us sitting with the sustainability team, hearing about all the things they're doing within Budweiser Brewing Group, and going, okay, what out of all the stuff you're doing, because some of the difficulty with sustainability, procurement teams, sometimes they've got too many things they want to talk about. You've got to try to connect it to the consumer problem, like any communications job. And the interesting thing about sort of where we came brewing with 100% renewable electricity being important was because not everybody could afford a Tesla or an electric car. So how could you make an everyday decision for a consumer, making them feel they're part of this journey? So that is how you bring stuff in. You have to make the consumer feel that they're part of it. And your job as a business or a marketer is to close that gap between the company and close the gap for the consumer to have an impact. Exactly as Matthias said, it's a team sport. The consumer's got to recycle, but the company's got to make it out of 100% renewable electricity. It's meeting the consumer halfway. That's where you get some really, really exciting sort of innovative solutions to how you're going to do stuff. And I think, we've working with, a lot of the brands mentioned, Heinz, PepsiCo, ABI, we're all trying to do that with them currently, is listen to what they're doing as a business and how do you make that accessible to a consumer, because that's what it should be. There's very little talk of compliance and pledges. You've got to do that. That's bare minimum. But then how do you create sustainability? How do you create that brand value through, as I said earlier, sort of the innovation and optimism? And I think, if I gave one bit of advice to any marketer, it's sit with the sustainability team for a week. They do some amazing stuff. And I think it's about finding out what of your brand can attach to that and make it famous, because I think that's the key thing. The more brands that do this, simply by Budweiser coming out saying they're brewed with 100% renewable electricity, the CEO then, Brito, got loads of emails, Salesforce, God, this is unbelievable, we want to do it, how did you do it? So I think there is that real, communicating it has a bigger impact than people often think.
And I think this idea of sustainability being built into the brand values, you know, we talk about it at Landor & Fitch as brand led. But I'd love to hear from perhaps Vikram and Marina, so I'll give you time to have a think, about how does sustainability fit within your company's purpose? So to Peter's point, how do you build it into the values within the organisations you work in? Marina, I will start with you. You're nodding vigorously. So.
Sure. Sure. I just think it's really interesting what Peter said there, and thinking about what Matthias was saying earlier on. You know, Elon Musk talks about us being okay with using energy. So his big idea is the batteries on the cars, and then how they kind of scale up. So the car was almost just a kind of, you know, a thing to demonstrate the battery, and it's about us living our lives and not feeling terrible about it. So we still want to drink Coke. Do you know what I mean? Everybody wants to drink Coke, but can we make it so we don't feel so bad about it? Can we do something about it? You know, so it's about that reimagining. It isn't just always about the product per se. It's about the kind of the whole piece and how we live our lives. So anyway, I just thought that was a brilliant point, Peter. So thank you for that. So in terms of sustainability and our purpose, we absolutely are. Scottish Enterprise's purpose is about creating good green jobs. So that is where we come from. So it is baked in, and I think you're absolutely right about it. Shouldn't be about compliance. It should just be about because it's a nice thing to do. You know, our role, we have shifted. Obviously 20 years ago we weren't talking about good green jobs, we're just talking about jobs, but now we recognise actually that's where the opportunities lie. So absolutely building in the development of jobs. You know, we have a very strong oil and gas sector in Scotland, so that's a huge, you know, challenge for us in terms of how we move forward. How do we help that industry change and move towards, now they will do it themselves in lots of different ways, but as an economic development agency, how do we ensure, and how does we as a country ensure that there's a just transition from oil and gas? So when I talk about just transition, we all know post-industrial devastation that causes has caused across the world, you know, through the 80s and 90s, the loss of jobs and things. We can't let that happen again. So, you know, how do we turn these jobs into good green jobs rather than kind of carbon heavy polluting jobs? So thinking about that, so that's really a big part of how we deliver things within Scottish Enterprise, and thinking about how we work with the businesses that we work with to kind of develop that. You know, we want to support businesses, industries and investors to grasp the opportunities. That is what absolutely our purpose is. So it's really built into what we're doing, and leading and influencing change as well, really talking up. You know, we work with a lot of small, medium-sized enterprises. You know, that it's more challenging for them if they're an existing business to think about how that journey to net zero, how do they get there, how do they change that, how do we help them along that way and not feel that it's all about a compliance and kind of pushing that down. How do we change their business models? How do we look at how they export or how they manage their business? So all of those things are absolutely baked into how we do things in Scottish Enterprise, because we need to get there, we need to help and support, and we see that as a huge opportunity for us in Scotland and for the globe to kind of to get to that point. So so for us, it's what we do.
It's baked in, brilliant. Vikram, how does it work at Emirates NBD? What goes on? You know, you said you mentioned you lead corporate responsibility and sustainability. So how do you marry those two kind of jobs that you have in your personal and your private life?
So you know, at the bank, the way we've defined our purpose is essentially keeping that you know, that aspect of the community, the bank, and the people within the organization that make the bank. You know, so it's really a cohesive balance that we're trying to strike. So we describe ourselves as a bunch of people who want to create opportunities to prosper for our customers, for our communities, and also our staff. And what we've done is that we've gone to the next level. I don't actually see in many organizations where we've linked that to the bank's performance management. So essentially, every colleague in the organization is now being asked to reflect on how are they creating opportunities to prosper. And there's a system that we've developed around collaboration, ownership, having that drive and the enterprise to make a difference. And that then becomes pretty much the quadrant on the back of which everyone's evaluated. So what that does is that, you know, but naturally everybody in the organization now starts seeing what does it mean to the company to succeed, and what role can they play to make sure that, you know, in everyday decisions. And I feel that in large companies, it's not just about those big announcements, it's about those thousands and millions of decisions that we take almost every day. And how does this thinking become then the bedrock of the way the organization moves forward? And we are not alone in this, because if you look at the financial sector, we've come under a lot of pressure, and the investors are asking us, our customers are asking us, and regulators are putting pressure on us to make sure that there's a shift in the way capital is utilized. And of course, banking is really, the mechanism of capital utilization for the economy. So the role that we are playing now is to see how do we get more and more capital deployed towards areas which are a little more climate friendly, which are able to make that difference in the society that's needed. And we've seen trillions of dollars in capital flows in that area. So some of you might be familiar with ESG investing and ESG funds. By 2025, this is like $1 trillion plus capital that is going to go behind companies and programs and lending structures, where only those organizations that have a clear view in terms of how do they see themselves in the society and how they're able to balance out the interests of their commercial needs along with the impact that they have in the environment, they will have a natural advantage. And the natural advantage is actually coming today in the form of pricing. So loans are getting cheaper for those who are able to declare very clearly that they're making a positive impact in the environment. So it's a very interesting journey, and I'm actually delighted to see the flow of capital, because not just because I'm from the capital sector, but I just feel that capital can have a huge influence on the way society moves forward and decisions are taken. And I'm just so glad that we as an industry are now under so much of pressure.
I think you make a really good point, around this idea of it has to be linked to performance. And, we've talked about the fact it has to be linked to values, but fundamentally it has to link to profit and performance. So you mentioned sort of the flow of capital. I love this idea, right, of the impact. You talked about the millions of decisions that are made every day, right? So Matthias, I'd love to get your thoughts on this as well. Do you think we as marketers in the millions of decisions, it sometimes feels like you make a million decisions every day, doesn't it? I don't know about you. Do you think that we have a role to play in challenging and provoking internally for the brands that we work with to do more in this space?
Yes.
There's
exclamation mark.
Yes, exactly. How do you see that working in practice?
Yeah, no, I liked what Peter was earlier saying. A pledge is an apology. I think when you look at Coke, we're very overt in our vision. We're reporting in every quarterly earnings release, etc., on the progress that we're doing. So as a result, it becomes exactly what Vikram was saying, almost a daily question for every employee involved in the decision making or in the designing of what we want to do. So I think the challenge is, even though we need to be consumer centric, the consumers, to quote Ogilvy from a couple of years back, they don't necessarily do or say what they feel. No, they think what they don't think what they feel. They don't think what they say, and they don't do what they say. And I think animal welfare is a great example for me. When I go into a supermarket in Singapore, I can get a dozen organic eggs free range for, say, 13, 14 Singapore dollar. But for the same price, I can conventionally farmed eggs, I can get 60, 70. So it becomes quite quickly a money challenge, where there are a lot of consumers out there that even if they would want to, they simply cannot. And that's where, in theory, it would be easy for us as marketers to say, well, let's just focus on where the business is. Reality, I think if we don't lead the change, we're never going to get there. So in the Philippines, we've just announced the decision to convert one of our plants into a distribution center that's producing powder juice in sachets. Now, there's no packaging opportunity or alternative out there at the moment that allows us to recycle. So we have made the decision to get out of this business simply because we are unable to find a recyclable solution, which is part of our vision as a company. I'll pause here for a second. I would ask everyone on the call to think about the most distinctive brand asset that you have for the brand that you are managing. I'll give you a second to think about it.
So the most distinctive brand asset for the brand that people are managing. Okay, good question. We'll give everyone a second to have a think about that.
Now I invite you to think about the fact you're removing that brand asset. Oh, yikes, that's a big shocker for us as marketeers, right? And when you think about a brand like Sprite, who for 60 years has been sold in green. Green color is what makes it distinctive. It's a clear beverage. If you put it in a clear bottle and you put it on shelf, it loses the stand out across all of the other sparkling beverages, or if it plays next to water, it looks like a water. So you lose something very fundamental. Now, the challenge is colored plastic or colored PET does not have the same value for collectors as clear PET, because it has to be separated out. It's not necessarily enough in the collection stream. So it often ends up being left out there, even though the collectors go through the informal sector, they collect in Southeast Asia. But in the end, they don't care about this one because it doesn't give them the same money when they go to the reseller. So we took the decision 1.5 years ago to remove the green color from the PET. Now, you can imagine when I proposed that to the team, and I said, that's what I want to do because I think it's right for us as a company. And then how can we make it actually a point of difference for the brand compared to some of the others? Not everyone liked the idea because on first glance, it's a shocker, right? It's like, oh my God, why am I giving up voluntarily something that's fundamental to the brand? And still today, 1.5 years later, whenever the brand isn't performing, it becomes a question of, well, is that because we removed the green PET, the green color from the PET, or is it some other cause? But at the end, what we saw in research is when we explain to consumers why we're doing it, we actually see a significant increase in purchase intention. So I think we have, as marketeers, a significant role to play in bridging this say-do gap that Ogilvy points out. Mm-hmm. If we don't lead that change, nobody else will do. And someone asked a question in the Q&A around government. I think at the end of the day, yes, we can wait for the government or we can lead the change. And I think as marketeers and business leaders, we need to do what we believe is right for us to have a reason and a license to operate. And I much rather lead that change than being regulated, because then I can do it in a way that I really believe makes a difference. And while governments in Europe might be well structured and organized to do it, and I have grown up in a country where deposit on packaging was there since I can think about it, I know it wouldn't work in the countries that I'm working and living in at the moment. So from that perspective, I much rather lead the change and do what is right than waiting for others to tell me and then hoping that it will work, because there's a high chance it won't.
Brilliant. I'm going to ask one more question actually to Marina, and then I'm going to open it up because we have got questions in the chat, and actually it's building on the point Matthias has just made, Marina, about this kind of idea of education and empowerment and who bears responsibility. How, in your opinion, who does bear that responsibility? Is it top level government? Is it the business leaders? Is it consumers themselves? Is it a messy mixture of everybody? What do you think?
We're all in a big melting pot. And yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we talked about it at the top of the session. I think everybody bears some responsibility. You know, governments are there to regulate, to legislate, to support. And, you know, that's part of my role, is to support businesses and look at the gaps and where, you know, perhaps smaller businesses need support, and in terms of that type of stuff. But businesses have got huge power, and, you know, and lots of businesses are marshalling their efforts. I mean, at COP there will be a significant corporate you know, showing there. A lot of the big brands will be there. They are really keen, you know, they've signed up to all sorts of things. Sorry, they're signed up to pledges, but, you know, but I think, you know, the OECD, you know, World Economic Forum, they're all signing up. The Business Roundtable in America, they all recognise that this is a challenge that we have to address for the long-term sustainability of businesses. You know, we can't pretend that this isn't really important for all of us. And consumers, yeah, and they need, you know, we need to not feel guilty about things. So let's pressurize businesses into changing, but also what other ideas are coming up and how do we use those, and really kind of challenge and ask questions from businesses. So I think it's a really exciting time, I think, for all of us to be taking that challenge and solving the problems that we've got, because they're huge. But we can do it, and look at the ingenuity we've had. The last 200 years of from industrial revolution to where we are, we can do it again. And I'm really optimistic about how we can reimagine how we live our lives and make develop economies and make everybody's lives a little bit better. So yeah, I'm really positive, but it's all our jobs. It's not just one area.
No, I love that idea that we have got proof of concept, right? We've invented lots of things over certainly not our lifetimes, but it's the human.
We can do it.
We can definitely do it. I've got a question actually I want to put to all of you, and it does kind of build on this idea of either pledges or regulation. What are your thoughts on things like B Corp sort of certification? And should more companies consider this as a way to demonstrate or show their commitment? Do you think consumers care? Do you think they're going to start to put those sorts of credentials into their purchasing funnel? Peter, I'm going to start with you, and then I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts on that.
Yeah, great. I mean, we're a B Corp, so we've been through that process, and I think it comes back to a sort of a question that sort of applies. I'm not going to go on, don't worry. It's about what's your intent, like even sustainability. As a business, why are you doing it? So I think you have to look at, if you're doing it as a defensive thing, that's fine. But if you're doing it as a proactive thing, that's even better. So I think you always start with the intent. And the intent why we created a B Corp for our people was, one, for staff retention, to get the best people, to get people who want to work in this space and make the world a better place. So I think B Corp is brilliant. For us, it was more of an action, like we've got to sign up to this. It's very difficult to do. It's difficult to get a good score in. Now, the consumer angle to this I find really interesting, because Ocado had it as an aisle probably about a year and a half, maybe 2 years, maybe, the pandemic, probably 3 years ago, and it did really well. But the problem with it is it's that chicken and egg scenario. I think B Corp is brilliant. Do enough people know what it is? Do enough people have to make that decision based on that? No, I think interestingly, the reason why companies should do it is actually to show that intent as a business, that you want to do business the right way and you want to have a sustainable future. It's back to the optimism point. I think it's probably one of the best things is if they, we're working with them really to try and get more consumers aware of it. I think it's too early for it to be a purchaser intent, but I think it will definitely get there. The US is looking to do it in stores, like the big supermarkets having B Corp aisles. So I think it's coming. I think it's very early. Consumers still don't know what it is. Consumers don't know what a carbon footprint is. So.
Or net zero possibly,
exactly.
as well. Vikram, what are your thoughts on it?
So there's this. I don't know whether some of you are familiar with this, but there's this rise of the fourth sector, and B Corp is a part of the fourth sector. So essentially, the fourth sector enterprises are those that are really at the middle of a commercial enterprise, an NGO, or a government organization, and each of these have different intents. But a fourth sector enterprise like a B Corp or a community interest company, which Sacred Groves is, exists for the benefit of the society, exists for the benefit of the consumers, and also exists for the benefit of the staff, and has some limited commercial aspirations as well. Because at the end of the day, that's what creates sustainability for any organization. So our journey in the fourth sector as a community-based company, we've got support from a fair number of companies, including Microsoft. And the reason behind that is because to qualify as a B Corp or a CIC, you have to go through go to a fairly rigorous process of selection. And it's not just that. Once you get the entry, there's a lot of disclosures that one needs to sort of comply with. So every year, and Peter's nodding vigorously, it's such a task, right? To just make sure that we're compliant, there's a full report that we put out there. So I think amongst institutional clients, there's a recognition certainly for B Corp and CIC companies there are about 15,000 CIC companies in the UK now. And if I'm not mistaken, there are almost 500,000 B Corp companies as well at various stages. So it's only a matter of time where it becomes something that consumers seek out as well. And I think a certain profile of consumption is already seeking out B Corp or CIC companies.
Yeah. Matthias, would you agree? Do you think it's going to become something consumers actively seek out?
Yeah, I think Peter just said something very important. Consumers don't know. I joined Danone a couple of years ago, and shortly after I joined, they announced that they had the first country B Corp certified. And I was the marketing director, had no idea what they were talking about. So when we made that announcement, the first thing I did was a quick Google to understand what we were announcing. It was not my country, so for different country, I wasn't involved in the process or anything. But it's probably a bit like fair trade symbols, etc. It can become a point of, let's say, final decision making. I don't think will ever be the decision driver. I spoke to the CMO of a company in Singapore a couple of weeks ago, and they had launched a product range that was all around natural, sustainable, etc. Now, they're completely ignored in the development that in the end, consumers are buying food because it tastes great, right? So if you don't get the fundamentals right for why I'm buying or consuming something, everything else doesn't matter. So will it be a point of decision making, whether it's B Corp or anything similar? Yes, absolutely. And I was so amazed when you just said it's 500,000 companies already. I think that's pretty amazing. I had not realized how far they have gotten already.
Okay. And Marina, anything final from you on this to build?
No, I don't think I can add very much other than I can imagine there's going to be, so BCAR has been around for a while, and, people were in the space have heard of it. But as you say, there isn't a lot of knowledge out there about it. But I think I'm imagining over the next few while there's going to be quite a lot of other certifications that are going to be popping up in various different, and then it becomes quite difficult. I think the unintended consequences of some of these things is quite challenging for consumers as well to kind of really understand what they actually mean, and can you trust, what's to be trusted, because B Corp is really difficult, but some might go through some, so there's lots of things around that you're kind of going, yeah, but does it answer all the questions? So I think there's I think that they're good in some ways as shortcuts to kind of make you feel good about buying something, but as you say, is it a decision making thing, or is it just to assuage your guilt?
An internal piece, as
yes.
Peter talked about, it's actually a better way of doing business.
Yeah,
but I think
for sure.
Bringing everything to a close, because we're almost out of time, there were some big themes that I was sort of taking out, and hopefully everybody who's joined us has taken out, things relevant to their own business and their own kind of marketing journey at the moment. Partly that was about education. You guys have just talked about that. It has to matter to consumers. It has to be consumer centric. We talked a bit about unexpected partnerships, shared learnings, common practice. Let's all keep talking and sharing. And in the spirit of that, if I could ask you all literally for one sentence each on what would your final piece of advice or your key piece of advice to leave the audience with, then I'll do a quick round robin before I just finish up and say goodbye to everybody. So Vikram, can I start with you? What's your one piece takeaway?
My one piece is a big term called intergenerational equity, which means that it is our responsibility to make sure that we leave behind a better world for the next generation, and the time is now.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Peter?
If you haven't started sustainability, start it today. You will sell more product.
And it's not too late. Excellent. Nice. Matthias?
I would say walk before the talk. There are too many people out there that talk, but then don't necessarily do. And I think that's what a pledge is sometimes. So do first, and then I think everything else will follow. And if this comes at the risk of brand value, potentially, take the risk, because otherwise that risk will materialize on its own over time anyway.
Yeah, it will come back anyway. Good advice. And finally, Marina, what's your takeaway for the audience?
So for me, I think when I think kind of quite a big theme came out was trust and transparency and honesty. We need to get there, but people's trust will be, eroded away if we just greenwash and pretend that things are, it's all fine. We've done this and he. So I think that for me is trust, honesty and transparency is what we need.
brilliant advice from everybody. So thank you all so much. It's been an excellent conversation. Thank you for your time to all our panelists, their wisdom, their advice. We will collate some learnings and share them with you, the audience. And please do take a quick minute to let us know some feedback. There we go, a poll has just popped up. And we'd love to know your thoughts on this session. There are another couple of sessions coming up as part of the Marketing Society's Conference of 2021 with the theme of Changemakers Unite. Very, very relevant to just what we've talked about today. We've got them in London and Hong Kong. So a region and a time zone to suit everybody. London's on the 10th of November and Hong Kong is on the 18th. So don't miss the chance to sign up. For now, an enormous thank you to everybody who joined and who engaged with us today. And once again, a massive thanks to our wonderful speakers. Thank you all.